It is a great joy to be here. We are taking part of the 15th National Meeting of Jesus' Friends with Chico Xavier and his Spiritist Christian work. And of course, at the same time, we are taking part of the second World Meeting of Jesus' Friends with Chico Xavier and his legacy. We are in 2022, so of course, it has been 20 years since Chico Xavier's return to the spiritual world. Of course, after he had lived a laborious life, he, of course, had a blessed life through his mediumistic skills. So now let's talk about the topic of my lecture. The commission asked me to talk about a specific point: time to heal with Jesus and Chico Xavier. Let me tell you something. Of course, when we talk about that, time to heal, it means that we have to heal ourselves with Chico Xavier and Jesus. Because we do know that everyone that is here on earth, and even the ones, even the spirits that dwell psychosphere of our planet, we know that all of us lack healing, self-healing, to be honest, to be precise. We have to find our spiritual healing, spiritual cure. In other words, this means that we have to set ourselves free from selfishness. We have to set ourselves free from the old man. And we know that the Spiritist doctrine that, of course, makes the gospel of Jesus alive, the doctrine helps us a lot. You know why? Because the doctrine helps us on the path of self-knowledge. So by knowing ourselves, we can, of course, achieve the truth. And this, of course, was taught by Socrates, the father of philosophy, as we all know. All right, so without further ado, I would like to begin our topic. Let me emphasize something really important. We know that Chico Xavier's mediumistic work, without any doubt, complements the code. It unfolds the code and the coding. It updates and amplifies decoding. It is the coding itself. We know that it is the coding itself in the third millennia after Christ. We know that Spiritism was codified in the mid 1900s. That's something that we know. And we usually say that Chico Xavier's mediumistic work projected Spiritist doctrine, the Spiritist doctrine, to the 20th century and, of course, to the 21st century as well. This means that in Spiritism nowadays, we have Spiritism and Christianity together. We have an updated doctrine, a very current doctrine. It has three important points: philosophy, science, and religion. Those three elements. We are pretty sure that all spirits that manifested themselves through Chico Xavier, and of course, even Emmanuel, we do know that all those spirits manifested themselves by obeying a plan, a higher plan, to be more precise. Chico Xavier's task was not fulfilled by chance. We know that that mission obeyed a plan. The coding itself obeyed a specific plan. On top of that, Jesus' arrival to earth obeyed a plan as well. The first revelation as well through Moses also obeyed a specific plan, a spiritual plan. And we do know that this plan is related to higher realms of existence. We just have to study, of course, Chico Xavier's life in detail. We're going to notice that. We're going to notice those characteristics from his birth, April 2nd, 1910, to his passing, June 30th, 2002. By studying his life, we can notice that Chico Xavier's mission was planned. We know that. That's a fact. On top of that, all spirits that manifested themselves through Chico Xavier, or maybe they were conducted to manifest themselves via Chico Xavier, those spirits were mediums themselves. They were mediums of other spirits. They were mediums of higher spirits. Let me give an example. Even the coding spirits were mediums of the spirit of truth. The coding spirits, all of them, Lacordaire, Lamena, Swedenborg, all those spirits that we are familiar with, including the anonymous ones that just signed as guardian angel of the medium, a protector, all those spirits, John the evangelist, Benjamin Franklin, all those spirits, all of them were mediums themselves. They were mediums of the spirit of truth. And we are pretty sure that the spirit of truth was John the Baptist. And of course, this was said by Chico Xavier himself in person. We heard that from Chico Xavier. Chico Xavier mentioned this to us. He even mentioned the Christian Spiritist communion in Uberaba. He mentioned that in that place. He said that some people in society, some people in the Parisian society revealed the identity of the Spirit of Truth, John the Baptist. He was the greatest of those who was born from a woman. John the Baptist was Jesus Christ's medium. He was the first, without any doubt. He was a medium. He was the very first one. Even before Christ, he opened the paths to Christ. So what I'm trying to say is that we are convinced that all spirits that wrote via Chico Xavier's mediumistic skills that manifested themselves through Chico Xavier's multiple mediumistic capacities, not only through psychograph. Of course, we know that books, of course, were written due to psychographs, of course, and psychophonia as well. We know that. But Chico Xavier, of course, had a myriad of mediumistic skills, clairvoyance, for instance, and clair hearing. He even could heal. And of course, he would prescribe sometimes, as we know. Chico Xavier was also an extraordinary physical effect medium. We know that spirits manifested themselves in a physical way through Chico Xavier's skills. That's a fact. In magnetism as well, waters were magnetic. The scents that occurred, they would appear disappear in the sessions, in the meetings. Sometimes the smell of flowers and roses and ether, some medicines as well. Chico Xavier was capable of that. In the beginning of the 1950s and late 1940s, we know that during that period in Pedro Leopoldo, along with Peixotinho, a great medium, Chico Xavier said that many spirits materialize themselves in full body. So what I'm trying to say is that Chico Xavier had a plethora of mediumistic skills. We know that Chico Xavier's spirit was and actually has been a very high spirit. That's a fact. So what I'm trying to say is that we are convinced that all spirits that worked with this extraordinary work, we have more than 500 books that were published. When Chico passed away, we had 412 books, but now we have more than 500 books that have been edited. And we also know that there is much material that hasn't been published, and this material is spread nationwide in Brazil. We know that this material was psychographed, and this, of course, happened due to Chico Xavier's extraordinary skills. It is the biggest mediumistic phenomenon of all time. Of course, we're not taking into account Jesus Christ, who is the divine medium, the medium of God. We are making reference to Chico Xavier. Or, of course, we are talking about mediums, as mediums of spirits that were human, of course. Without any doubt, Chico Xavier was the biggest mediumistic phenomenon of all time. In a nutshell, we are convinced that Emmanuel, through Chico Xavier, didn't do any personal kind of work. People that want to study these small books that I'm showing you, look, people that delve into this very small collection, Fonte Viva, Vinha de Luz, Pão Nosso, Caminho, Verdade e Vida, all in Portuguese. All those four books, of course, they're going to be important. And Palavras de Vida Eterna, Words of Eternal Life. People that delve into those books, people that really want to study those books in detail, they are going to understand that Emmanuel had a very detailed study of the gospel, the entire gospel, and I would say the entire New Testament, to be honest, and with more emphasis, the first gospels and the letters of Paul. Regarding the gospels, Matthew, Luke, Mark, and John, regarding those gospels, Emmanuel talked about the Spirit present, studying chapters and studying the verses one by one. And Emmanuel was able to synthesize everything in a very elegant way. And of course, just spirits, just higher spirits would be able to do that. Just those kinds of spirits would be able to do this kind of task. People that delve into the study of those books are going to notice that Emmanuel, even though he was a very high spirit, of course, we know that in a book called Renuncia, he's a father, Father Damien, the first writer of Brazil. He was Father Manuel da Nóbrega. He was a Portuguese priest, Manuel da Nóbrega. We know that Brazil owes a lot to Father Manuel da Nóbrega, and of course, many people would like to, they want to underestimate his importance. He was a Jesuit, of course, but we do know that we have spiritists that are good. Of course, we have also spiritists that do not study that well. So Father Manuel da Nóbrega was the father of São Paulo. That's really important. He took part of the foundation of Rio de Janeiro, a city as well in Brazil, and also in Salvador, in Bahia, another city in Brazil. He was concerned about education. He was the apostle of the Gentiles in Brazil by bringing the gospel to the indigenous tribes, to catechize, to teach them what Christ did. And of course, he did an amazing job. And of course, we know that he was a very high spirit. That's a fact. But I mean, we're sure about that. Emmanuel was a medium himself. Chico Xavier said this, that André Luiz, in his works here, as you can see, I'm showing you a book, No Mundo Maior, in the Bigger World. In this collection, André Luiz, the spirit, worked as a medium to other spirits, to a team of spirits, more than 10 spirits, if I'm not mistaken, 13 spirits. So they are the spiritual mentors, of course, that use pseudonyms in André Luiz's books. And we are pretty sure, according to Inácio Ferreira, we know that those spirits, those structures that are present in André Luiz's books, we know that those spirits, of course, they use pseudonyms, and of course, they also used other names to refer to themselves. And of course, it took part of the coding itself. So, what I'm trying to say is that those spirits didn't do anything through Chico Xavier, anything personal. So Emmanuel didn't do anything personal through Chico Xavier. He abided from his name. He adopted the name Emmanuel, that means God is with us, as we know. And then Luis himself, he was Dr. Carlos Chagas, a very important scientist in Brazil, a very important humanist. We also know that he adopted a pseudonym. So, what I'm trying to say is that all those spirits were mediums of higher plans. That's a fact. Regarding Chico Xavier, he was not only a medium. Let's make this really clear. Look, those spirits, all of them, mobilized themselves in groups of spirits in the spiritual world. Regarding Chico Xavier, what happened to him happened to Allan Kardec as well. So the group of the Spirit of Truth may be dozens and dozens of spirits. And Allan Kardec, he was by himself. Of course, he had the help of other mediums. Sometimes, of course, from time to time, he relied on other mediums, as we know, physical effect mediums or other kinds of mediums. Mediums that worked with him and helped him, but then they disappeared in a certain way. They left him. Even the ladies, the Budam sisters, even Miss Jaffer, of course, they were important mediums. Hermans as well. They were important mediums that helped Allan Kardec, but then later on they left him in a certain way. So, of course, we had groups of spirits around Allan Kardec, because we know that Allan Kardec, for sure, as Emmanuel says in the book A Caminho de Luz, Towards the Light, was one of the most important apostles of Jesus Christ, better saying. It is in the book Towards the Light. He was one of the brightest apostles of Jesus. He knew what he was doing. So the spirits were around Allan Kardec. So all those spirits that wrote through Chico Xavier are really important. And Chico Xavier was by himself as well in a certain way. And this happened when he was 17 years old. He was a young man. He was, of course, really young when he dedicated his life to becoming a medium. He started psychographing on July 8th, 1927. All those spirits started to orbit him. They were satellites, as a metaphor. They were satellites orbiting Chico Xavier. And of course, his body was a star, so to speak, that would attract the presence of those spirits and of those satellites. He was a young man, a 17-year-old man. Can you imagine that? He lived in a small city, Pedro Leopoldo. And of course, he had to face oppositions coming from different parts, persecutions, of course, prejudice. He was a young man, of course, he couldn't study a lot. He had to leave school when he was 13 years old. And of course, he wouldn't be able to do what he did. When he was 22 years old, he was able to release a book called Parnaso de Além Túmulo, which is a book, let's put it this way, that of course surpasses many books in quality. It is a very good book, of course. It has very important, a very good wording. It is a book, of course, that surpasses all books that are similar. So what I'm trying to say is that all books from the great poets, all books that were written by Brazilian authors and Portuguese authors, we know that Parnaso de Além Túmulo is a very good piece of writing. And this book, of course, drew the attention of the Brazilian Academy of Letters. Chico Xavier was 22 years old. He was a young man. He was as young as the great poet Castro Alves. You see, Castro Alves was a genius, of course, a Brazilian genius of poetry that passed away, as we know. He passed away, he was young. So what I'm trying to say is that his work was not conceived by chance. So this boy, this young man that worked at an emporium in Pedro Leopoldo, he of course took care of the harvest, and then Augusto dos Anjos would approach him. Augusto dos Anjos just wrote a book when he was alive called I. It is a fantastic book, an extraordinary book, and very complex to be honest. Augusto dos Anjos would meet him and would dictate the sonnets, and of course other spirits as well. Cruz de Souza, Olavo Bilac, Alberto de Oliveira, and of course we had other important writers as well in Brazil. And we also had all the important writers from Portugal. We had João de Deus, Guerra Junqueiro, Amparo de Quintal, so on and so forth. We have many examples of Brazilian Portuguese writers. So, in order to fulfill the promise that he had to do, Chico Xavier, for 75 years, he was able to do his work in a continuous way. And of course, Chico Xavier was not only a medium, a machine, so to speak. He was not only a hand, a tool that was used by the spirits in psychographs. Actually, Chico Xavier was, of course, a bright room, so to speak. He was a living room with lots of light that would welcome those higher spirits. He would talk to those spirits, as I've just mentioned. Chico Xavier made possible that those spirits would write important books, fabulous writings. And of course, Chico Xavier was this link. Firstly the poets, and then we had the prose. First we had poetry, and then we had prose. And of course, we had Falando a Terra, and then we had the doctrine itself, Emmanuel, André Luiz, and of course, to whom we had Humberto de Campos, the great writer. And Humberto Campos used a pseudonym called Brother X, Irmão X. Bezerra de Menezes, the doctor. Batuíra as well. Carba Schutel, May, Maria Dolores, all those spirits would work together. They were links between thoughts and of higher plans. So what I'm trying to say is that, in a nutshell, Chico Xavier cannot only be considered a medium. Okay, he was Emmanuel's medium. Sometimes some people say that people that do not study Chico Xavier or do not understand what he truly did, do not delve into the study of Spiritism. Sometimes people say that. Because let me tell you something, we have been noticing that people say lots of things about Chico Xavier and André Luiz's work. They don't know André Luiz and what he wrote. Many people make some comments, opinions about Emmanuel's works without studying his work for real. They do not delve into a systematic, methodical study of his work. That's a problem. We learned that the Spiritist doctrine has to be studied as a method, in a systematic way. The doctrine has to be studied in details. That's a fact. What I'm trying to say is that Chico Xavier cannot be considered only as a medium. so to speak. We do consider Chico Xavier the highest spirit, the most important spirit, the highest one, taking into account everyone because of the works that he wrote. Because let me tell you something really important. He did extraordinary things. Through Chico Xavier, we had the manifestation of spirits. We had lots of literature, of course. We had children's books, poetry. We also had prose. We had tales as well, verses, romances. We also had letters. Uh, we also had short essays, and we had many women, children as well. Many women, as I've just noticed, people that are there, kids, were able to write through Chico Xavier. So, as you can see, Chico Xavier was very flexible in terms of his skills. So, he, of course, was a medium to everyone. He was an interpreter. So, in order to be that interpreter, to be an interpreter of those spirits, in order to be so flexible in terms of his mediumistic skills, Chico Xavier, of course, had to be a very high spirit. So, without any doubt, we can, of course, affirm by studying Chico Xavier's work, we can say that he was the highest. Let me tell you something. We have to do a comparison study in Spiritism. We have to compare texts. What I'm trying to say is that the Pentateuch has to be studied along with Chico Xavier's work, and Chico Xavier's work has to be studied along with the Pentateuch, the first five books of the Bible. We have to compare both writings. And as time goes by, naturally, one work complements the other. That's a fact. So, by doing this, we can conclude something really important. We are sure that without any doubt, Chico Xavier was the reincarnation of Allan Kardec. And of course, this was predicted to him. This was done by the Spirit of Truth. This was predicted but not only by the Spirit of Truth, but also by Dr. Demiri, a friendly spirit that would take care of Allan Kardec's health. He was Kardec's friend, and he would also always manifest in the Parisian Spiritist Society. Allan Kardec said that. He wrote that he would reincarnate at the end of the century or the beginning of the next one. And as the spirits predicted, he would work since a tender age. And Chico Xavier, of course, started working when he was 17 years old, because we know that Allan Kardec was able to dedicate himself to the study of manifestations. He dedicated time to study to the work when he was 49 years old, nearly 50 years old. He took part of the first session in an old lady's house. Allan Kardec, who was going to turn 50 years old, if I'm not mistaken, when he started working. It was in 1854. He started working in 1854. He participated in the first session in May. And let me tell you something curious. And Chico Xavier also started working in May. His first session of Evangelho no Lar, Gospel at Home, by Spiritist couple, the Perazos, because they wanted to take care of his one of their sister's obsessions. This lady, of course, was suffering a lot, and this lady was a tool so that Chico Xavier would get as a gift, so to speak, the Book of Spirits and one edition of the Gospel according to Spiritism. So what I'm trying to say is that out of this group of spirits, Chico Xavier was the most evolved. He was, of course, the highest. We also believe that we are not making any mistake. We are not exacerbating Chico Xavier's importance. And of course, we're not making any mistake or say any heresy that Allan Kardec, the professor, they were he was the most important spirit, of course. Of course, he was not more evolved than the spirit of truth. However, much more evolved than all the other spirits that manifested themselves. Spirits that took part of the gigantic work of coding. So we can see this in Allan Kardec's work, the collection of the Spiritist magazine. We also have texts that were written by Allan Kardec. By doing this kind of study, we won't have any problem in seeing this. Allan Kardec was not just a mere compiler, a mere organizer of this work. He was the intellectual agent of coding itself without any doubt, along with the spirit of truth. And Chico Xavier, of course, did the same thing. Chico Xavier was also a medium, of course, and he was a link. So by being this, he participated in a very uh, conscious way. He took part of this work in a very clear way. But let me tell you something very important. Even though Chico Xavier was a man, was a human being, that's a fact, even though he was a person, flesh and bones, even though he was a man, he had to subject himself to the rules of the planet. We can find this in the book Renúncia, when Alcione wants to leave Sirius to come to Earth to aid Father Carlos. We know that Alcione is warned. Look, you're going to be exposed to the laws of the planet. And even the Lord had to subject himself to the laws. And of course, Chico Xavier, he was a man, of course. That's a fact. He was a superior and high spirit. He is a high spirit, of course, without any doubt. However, Chico Xavier was a man. And I would say that Chico Xavier can be considered by us the future of humankind. In this book here, No Mundo Maior, in the Bigger World, chapter 9, let me just get the book for you. I'm going to mention something from this book. There is a very important study about being a medium. Calderaro mentions something really important. He says that in order to help the present, men, of course, are obliged to live in the future of the race, of humankind. Even though Chico Xavier was a human being, Chico Xavier he lived the future of humankind. That's why people could not understand him sometimes. And even by own spiritists, people that lived near Chico Xavier, that's really important. That's really interesting. We see that happening. Jesus would always attract people that were disturbed. The presence of light attracts darkness. So Jesus attracted people that were feeling overwhelmed, people that were in the darkness. And of course, this happened to Kardec as well in the Parisian society. Kardec says that he was betrayed in the Parisian society. We know that spirits told Kardec that Kardec had suffered a lot. And of course, he was disappointed. He got really bothered. They said that Kardec could have had a longer life, but his health got worse. So Allan Kardec passed away when he was 65 years of old. He was an intellectual. And of course, he had so many things to do and to offer to the world. He passed away on March 31st, as we know. He was 65 years old. And of course, he had to rush in order to create the Genesis in 1868. Chico Xavier also attracted people that were disturbed, even when he was in Pedro Leopoldo. And he attracted, of course, in his family as well, his own family, his blood. people that could not understand him. And of course, many people understood what he did. We have José Xavier, his brother. He was very important. He was his right arm, but he passed away early. He had a problem in his brain. José Xavier was a great brother, a great friend of Chico's, and he passed away very early. And Chico Xavier attracted those kinds of people. Many people would get to him in Luis Gonzaga's center, and they wanted to participate in the group, and then they revealed themselves as bad people, you see. So Chico Xavier suffered from this problem. Let me give you an example. Chico Xavier lived the future of humankind because, without any doubt, Chico Xavier lived the future of humankind. Professor Herculano Pires would say that Chico Xavier was the PC, the Psi man. So he was uh, he was a person that actually was in the present and in the future, interexistent. Sometimes Chico Xavier said that Professor Herculano was not clear. Chico Xavier would not understand what Professor Herculano said. He confessed that. And then Chico said something. Look, I finally understood what Herculano said. And he said, look, I was in the I was in a group, psychographing. I was there in the group Espírita Prece, and I was psychographing. When Emmanuel came, so I was there psychographing. It was a continuous work. At the same time, Emmanuel was talking to him, to Chico Xavier, and other spirits were there, and Chico was there. Emmanuel would say, Chico, we do need your presence right now from the other side. So what I'm trying to say is that they wanted Chico Xavier at the same time that Chico Xavier was psychographing. So what I'm talking about ubiquity, being in two places at the same time. So Chico said that while he was there psychographing, the spirits were doing this for him through his body. Chico Xavier was able to unfold himself. He went to the spiritual realm. He went to the spirit to the group in the spiritual world, and he said, "Look, the room is upstairs, on top of our group. It's here." And of course, it's a much bigger room. And I was there, and the person who was there was teaching was Professor Herculano Pires. Of course, Herculano had passed away a long time ago. So Emmanuel said, look, Chico, we do need you here from this side because we do have a lady, a mom, a mother, and she doesn't know that she passed away. And of course, she would like to get a message from for her son, and her son had passed away, but he is on a higher realm, and this is a very desperate situation, of course. And she said that she just accepts a message from his son if you are going to be the medium. So as you can see, Chico Xavier went to the group in the spiritual world, and he was a medium at the same time. So he was psychography on earth. It was concentrated, and of course at the same time he was using his spiritual body psychographing another message in the group, the same group, but from the spiritual realm. And of course this was happening at the same time. Professor Colonopilius was there teaching the audience, and the audience was full of spirits. And of course we had a very big group. Can you imagine that? So now let's talk about this important characteristic. Chico Xavier is the future of humankind. And Chico said, look, now I understood, from this moment on, I was able to understand what Professor Colano had told me about. So I am at the same time inter-existent. I am in two places at the same time. So I would like to say that Chico Xavier's mediumistic work by making the gospel alive is clarifying, of course. It sets people free, and of course, it heals people, of course. We know that Spiritism, by setting people free, heal people. Spiritism, by clarifying knowledge, heals people. It heals us from being fanatics. It heals us from prejudice. At least tries to do that, or at least is trying to make this effort. Of course, we have been trying to do this because we are spiritists. Bezerra de Menezes would say there is a very important condition between the time before I was a spirit and now that I'm a spirit. I'm a spiritist. Bezerra would say that when I was not a spiritist, I was looking for mistakes in a certain way. Now that I'm a spiritist, I am looking. I'm running away from mistakes. You see, so there's a major difference between those two approaches. And we know that Spiritism heals people. It is a healing doctrine because we know that without any doubt, it heals us from being a fanatic. It heals us from being prejudicial because we know that we are diverse. We are at the same time the same, but we belong to a plethora of diverse entities. We are brothers and sisters, but of course, each brother, each sister has a specific identity. And of course, we get healed from selfishness because it invites us to uh, charity because we know that without charity we cannot save ourselves. So of course we learn how to forgive. Of course we learn how to avoid being upset. So we shouldn't hold grudges. We shouldn't be intolerant. So Spiritism helps us in many things. Spiritism opens our minds to many aspects, of course. And let me tell you something. Spiritism cannot do everything because if Spiritism opened our minds even more, possibly we wouldn't be able to handle so many things. You see, that's why Jesus came to earth to preach the gospel by teaching in parables, because we were spiritual children, and even the apostles themselves were not able to understand the parables. When Jesus talked about sow with the seeds, the apostle said, Lord, please help us, teach us this parable, because not even the apostles were able to understand this apparently simple parable. So Chico Xavier said once, look, Jesus had to choose 12 apostles, 12 human apostles, to interpret in a human way his divine teachings. You know why? Because by not doing this, men and women would not be able to understand Christ. So let me just say something. The apostles, they humanized the divine. So they humanized the gospel. They did the best they could in order to make the gospel to be accessible to everyone, so that the gospel could be accessible to humankind. So Chico Xavier was dead, of course. He was a high spirit because Allan Kardec didn't have time to conclude his work. And Spiritism is a dynamic doctrine and is a progressist doctrine. This work, of course, is not going to end. Never is going to end. Spiritism is always evolving because science is always evolving. Thoughts are always evolving. It creates new things and it's going to create new things in the horizon. Ethics, morals, values are going to advance as time goes by. So Chico Xavier's mediumistic work is clarifying, of course. It sets people free and it heals people. There is a message from the Spirit of Truth on chapter 6 on the Gospel according to Spiritism. And the Spirit of Truth, by interpreting Jesus Christ's thoughts, he says, I am the doctor of souls, and I'm bringing you the medicine to heal you, and I'm bringing you the remedy that's going to heal you. So we know that, that's in the book. So what I'm trying to say is that in Spiritism, we know that the earth, of course, here on earth we are sick spirits. And sometimes many of us spiritists are the ones that are most sick, to be honest. You know why? Because when we get sick, we just think about ourselves, when we get jealous, when we think that we are the best, when we think that we are the best ones, we have the truth. We get really sick when we think that we consider ourselves superior to other people. That's something important. On earth, let me tell you something. On earth, we're all sick spirits that need healing. Dr. Inácio Ferreira was a psychiatrist, and he teaches us this. He says, look, my son, my daughter, spiritual imperfection by itself is a disease. We are imperfect spirits, of course, and spiritual imperfection by itself is a disease. So, what I'm trying to say is that it's high time to accept the fact that we are patients. We are patients of the Spiritist doctrine. Doctor is a divine doctor, and we have, of course, other spirits that are our nurses, and those nurses are, of course, taking care of us from a spiritual perspective. Allan Kardec, of course, he was a very important nurse from Christ. Chico Xavier was, of course, a very important nurse of Christ. And of course, we are patients. We do need help. We are sick. And of course, we have lots of ailments, lots of diseases. And we have a very tough past. Dr. Inácio says, look, my son, my daughter, do not talk about the past because it's just rubbish in a certain way. Because of course many people want to know more about the past, but we shouldn't know that. Dr. Inácio, no, no, no. He says, no, no, do not talk about this. The past is just trash. And that's it, that's true. So what do we have from the past? I mean, we just have to understand our biases here in the present. And of course, we have to perform some sort of self-analysis. We have to know ourselves, and the doctrine aids us in this on this path. So of course, it's high time to do this. Spiritism has been revealed to the world in 1857 through the Book of Spirits, as we know. So what I'm trying to say is that it's been more than 150 years since the Spiritist doctrine has been revealed. And we know that we have the gospel. We have had the gospel for 2,000 years. So we need to heal ourselves. That's why the topic that I'm talking to you about is important. The topic is time to heal. Time to heal ourselves with Jesus Christ and Chico Xavier. So that's important. And of course, we have to take into account his Spiritist and Christian doctrine, because the book I'm showing you is a book that can heal you. A Spiritist message can set people free. And when this happens, when we are set free from specific ideas that are embedded in us, some orthodox thoughts, so on and so forth, we can get healed. It is not something immediate that happens out of the blue. We are far away from this immediate cure. We are not, of course, completely healthy. We are far from being that. However, we have to accept ourselves, and we have to see ourselves as patients. And of course, we have to be humble. Because let me tell you something really important. People say some spiritists think that they are doctors. No, no, no. Jesus is a doctor. They are not doctors. There are many high spirits that can be considered nurses. But let me tell you something. We are sick, and spiritism is a doctrine, of course, that wants to begin something new. This healing process. Humankind needs to be healed, and the medicine is love, as we know. Jesus Christ said that, love yourselves as I love you. Chico Xavier would say the following, look, many philosophies have taught us, we have this golden rule, Love yourselves. That's important, of course, but Chico said something important. Jesus was right. Love yourselves as I love you. And why is that? Because when you say as I love you, surpass the idea of loving yourselves. The second idea surpasses the first because Jesus taught us that you just love for loving's sake. You do not want anything in return. Of course, love is donation. Love is helping. By loving, we forget ourselves. There are no second intentions. Of course, there is no interest. So we just love somebody because we want to. So let me tell you something really important, my brothers and sisters. In the Spiritist doctrine, which is Christianity, in essence, that has been updated, enlivened. We have an extraordinary doctrine that clarifies many questions, it consoles us, and sets us free. That's why it is a healing doctrine. And Chico Xavier's mission was really important, of course, as we know, and his mission was connected to healing. It has been a healing mission because we know this via his examples, via his words, via the love that he gave to us, and of course via his life as an apostle because he lived the gospel. Chico Xavier, he is the reincarnation of Allan Kardec. Allan Kardec, he is the reincarnation of Plato. Socrates' disciple. Lots of peace.